Well, welcome back, folks. Today we're going to move on with installing the taillight assembly on the YL1. And I think I've sorted out how I'm going to mount this. And for those of you that have been following my channel, you probably have seen, perhaps you've seen the video I posted looking for help on how this was originally mounted. A few folks very helpfully did respond. And working through what those folks shared with me, as well as carefully looking at the parts diagrams and how my bike was originally put together, I've come up with a final solution. Originally, when I took the bike apart, it had these 4 sets of nuts and bolts that held this bracket onto the fender, the rear fender. There was no rubber grommets. There was this odd-looking little washer that I believe is called out on the parts diagrams. I haven't been able to find 3 more of these. Well, I take that back. I found one of them on eBay under the part number that Yamaha called out, and it didn't look anything like this part. It was looked like a half moon-shaped round washer. Looked like a round washer with one edge cut off, so it made it look like a half moon shape. Nonetheless, these original nuts and bolts are in very poor condition, as you can see. And even if I was to strip them and replate them, they wouldn't, I don't think, come out very good because the surface would be so rough from pitting and corrosion. So what I decided to do was to go ahead and come up with a little bit of a hybrid system because well, let me back up. One of the problems I have, or one of the things I have to learn to accommodate, is this NOS light fixture, taillight fixture, which has a ground, like you can see right there. The original light fixture right here, and this is the one I took off the bike, does not have a ground. It has just the yellow and the blue. In addition, the NOS one here, the newer one, has a rubber backing, which isolates this fixture from the bracket. And though I probably could restore this original, and I'd have to take it apart and repaint this, and it's bent, I'm going to choose to go ahead with this NOS unit and accommodate this ground wire here, which I think makes a lot more sense anyway. I ordered from Yamaha the bolts the replacement bolts that they called for to replace this item, and they look like this. They're a shoulder bolt, and they seem to be a little bit too long, and they're certainly, with the shoulder, is too big in diameter to go through these holes right here. There's a little oil on there because I was doing some test fitting. So the solution I've come up with, again, is a bit of a hybrid. What I'm going to do is use these bolts. These are Kawasaki bolts, actually. I went through my Kawasaki inventory, and I had a very similar bolt to the originals from Yamaha. And I did have to cut them off. They're a little bit too long, so I happen to have 4 of those original Kawasaki bolts. Those are brand new. And I also had some washers from Kawasaki right here. You can see this is the bag that I pulled out of my inventory, left over from some other project. And then of course I have new Yamaha nuts that I originally bought to go with these bolts that I'm going to use. Long story short, I'm going to use the Kawasaki bolt, Kawasaki washer. I'm making up my own grommets. You can see it right there. There's some grommets, some flat grommets with a grommet on each side. So the fender will go right in here. So I'll have bolt, washer, grommet, fender, bracket, washer, grommet, washer, nut. I had to get that right here. And it'll look something like this when it's installed. The reason I'm using these little homemade grommets like you see here is I want to protect this bracket in the fender paint. I don't want them to be against each other due to vibration. And I have a suspicion this bike does vibrate, though I haven't run it yet, so I don't know for sure. This is electrically isolated anyway, so it's not a matter of I need a ground or an earth connection between this bracket and the fender for the solution I'm going to pursue. Big Casey did indicate that this ground wire or earth wire connects to the bracket for the rear fender, so that's how I'm going to eventually wire it. But for now, that's the hardware that I'm going to use to attach the bracket to the rear fender. Now, in terms of the washers themselves, right there, I need 8 of them, 2 for each bolt. And I'm going to show you how I made those. To make those little round rubber grommet replacements, I took an old piece of inner tube, and I keep many of my old inner tubes. I got a box of them in my pole barn. This is handy material for a lot of different uses, including one such as this. Just cut a piece of an inner tube, and you can see where I've been playing around with making the original grommets. I tried a couple of different sizes, as you can see. And I used these punches. I got a whole set of these punches in all different sizes. I got some large ones and some small ones. This is the larger one. This cuts the outside diameter. This is a small one. It cuts the inside diameter. And in order to do this, it's quite simple. Using a block of wood as a backer, I just take this punch like that. Using a mallet, brass mallet, do that a few times till I cut out the grommet itself. So that's the OD, or outside diameter, right there. Then it's a matter of taking the small one, this is for the inside diameter, centering it on the, I'll bring you in a little bit closer here, and I just eyeball it like that. Again, take my mallet, and there I have a rubber grommet or washer. It's probably more appropriately called a washer in this case. I already got the rest of them all made. That is, the rubber grommets or washers are already made. So now it's a matter of just taking all these parts and going over the bike. And finally, I'm going to get to install my taillight bracket. I did want to walk you through this though, so you understood a little bit of my thinking and how I got to this point. So let's go over the bike and install the bike. Well, I've got everything laid out here ready to install the bracket to the fender. As I was getting ready to get these pieces together, a thought occurred to me that perhaps I should add an additional set of rubber washers or grommets so that I'd have 3 per bolt. And I went over and looked at some of my other projects, and specifically the SL70, TS185, and they're set up very similarly at their taillight assemblies to what I'm going to do here. And that is, they have a single piece grommet that's designed to fit through the opening here and actually sandwiches this bracket and the fender. So what I'm going to do is emulate that. So I made a third set of rubber washers or grommets, and that's this set right here that I'm pointing to. I made the holes in the center a little bit smaller than the originals so that this washer, this rubber washer or grommet, will act as a little bit of a retainer to hold the bolts in place, so that when I mount this on the fender, I don't have to wrestle around and trying to keep these rubber grommets or washers from falling off. So these that I'm pointing to right here I just made. So now I'm going to go ahead and put this in place. I'm going to push these bolts back just a little bit. You give me a little wiggle room here. Try to get everything aligned at the same time. It might be a little bit fiddly. We'll see how this goes. Getting all four of these lined up together at the same time. There. Actually, that wasn't too bad. It went easier than what I thought. Now I've got to install a rubber washer or a grommet and a flat washer like that on the back side along with the nut. So I'm going to put a little bit of thread locker like that, and then see if I can't get this assembly together. So I've got the first of the four done. Now I'll continue to do the remaining three exactly the same way. So we've got the bracket mounted, it's rubber mounted, it's insulated from the fender. It's important when you're using rubber grommets or washers in this case like I did not to over tighten, otherwise you just squeeze them flat and push them out and you really tend to negate the benefit of it. But I just snug those down just a bit, and of course they have Loctite on them so they're not going anywhere. So now we've got the bracket itself mounted finally. And I'm going to move on now and put on the taillight mount assembly with the wiring itself. So now we'll go ahead and install the taillight bracket or light bulb socket itself along with a grommet. This grommet goes right here and allows this wire to pass through. This is a new part. In fact, the hardware for attaching the bracket right here, these acorn nuts and the tooth lock washers, internal tooth lock washers, are all new hardware. Still available from Yamaha, including the grommet. So I'm going to put a little dielectric grease around the edge here of this grommet just to ease its transition home here. This is a split grommet, which is not something I see all that often. Let's see if we can't get this just to pop right into place like that. So that went in nice and easy. Again, there's hardware, acorn nuts, and tooth lock washers on the back of that plate, and this goes through like that and fishes down through there. Now this this wire, piece of wire here, the PVC sleeve over it, is pretty stiff. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to gently heat this PVC sleeving with a hot air gun, just to make it a little flexible so that I can conform it to go through that grommet. In fact, before that, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little dielectric grease on the inside edges of the grommet to make it easier for the loom to go through. So I'm just going to heat this a bit gently. You don't want to overdo it, obviously. So if it doesn't burn my hands, I'm not going to burn the part. That's why I'm doing it the way I'm doing it, because then I can tell how hot it's getting. You could also put a little dielectric grease over here on the wires themselves. I'm not sure that's necessary. We'll see here. And that went through pretty easy, actually. Now we've got the hardware that we're going to mount this with. I'm just going to get that acorn nut started. I'm not going to tighten it down yet. And you'll see why here in just a minute. I'm going to put a little anti-seize on these threads. And I'm just going to use a little paintbrush. You can see there with a little anti-seize on it. I'm basically going to paint it on. Now I'm just going to snug up those nuts. And there we got the taillight bracket installed. The wiring is not connected yet, obviously. I'll worry about that at another point in time. I do not have the lens itself, the red lens itself. I'm waiting for that to arrive. I ordered that here a week or so ago. That'll fit over the bulb. I did test this with my battery pack, my jumper pack, my 12-volt jumper pack to make sure the bulb, both elements work in the bulb, and they do. So I know this is functional at this point, so we got that finally done. As I move on to finishing up, tightening up the wiring going to the taillight assembly, this is obviously the wiring coming from the main loom further up in the frame. The only two wires I need to worry about are the yellow and blue. Yellow for the brake light, blue for the tail light itself. This brown and green are for the turn indicators, which this bike doesn't have. And in fact, these two wires do not connect to anything back up further in the wire loom itself. They're dead wires. So I just want to get them out of the way. What I'm going to do is simply take one of these little boots that goes over typically a male connector, one of my spares, and I'm going to plug it in here, loop this one around, and connect it and I'll use this as a joiner. just to keep them reasonably clean and dry so moisture doesn't get up in here, and tidy up the wiring a little bit. So in order to do that, I'm just going to take a little dielectric grease, one of my favorites. You've seen me use this before. I'm going to put a little dielectric grease, a little smear of it right there. I'm going to insert that in and then smear this end with dielectric grease also. And that's done for two reasons. Primarily for waterproofing, environment proofing, and also make it easier to slide them together. So you can see I've got that completed loop. Now I'm just going to take a clean cloth and wipe off the excess dielectric grease from the outside. So that it's not all over the place. Now I'm going to take just a zip tie, an everyday zip tie, and connect these together. Where I put the zip tie isn't terribly important. I don't want to put too tight a bend here in this part of the wire, if I can avoid it. I think right about there will work. I think I'll put a second one right here while I'm at it. And just cut off the excess. And now we've gotten that neatened up, and it's reasonably weatherproof here. Tuck these wires up underneath here into those little tabs that's welded underneath the frame. I'll see if I can get you a better shot of that a little bit later when I've got it done. Now I'm going to go ahead and continue with connecting these two wires to the taillight assembly. To make the three jumpers for the ground and the two hots going to the taillight, those little 3-inch extensions, which are called out on the Yamaha parts diagram. I think I shared that before. I just made my own. What I did is, this is the original taillight fixture that came with this bike, and the wiring was a little bit hacked up on the ends. But what I did is I simply used these wires off the original, which was hacked up anyway, and cut the extensions that I used up underneath here from the original wiring. It was the right color, it was the right size. Once I got beyond the ends that had been chopped up by someone else years ago and they hacked together the lighting, I just clipped that off, and I had plenty of material left. Now I won't throw this away. I will keep this with the other parts I've removed from the bike. Probably won't ever need it again, but it could be made serviceable again. It's got a bend in it right here, you can see it. It could probably be straightened and repainted, wet coated. It couldn't be powder coated because this is rubber here. And you could repair the wiring if one was so inclined. I wasn't. I just wanted a totally new fixture. But nonetheless, that's where I got the wiring from. I just repurposed the original. This is still usable in the future if anyone's so inclined, but I was able to match the wiring perfectly that way. Just thought I'd share that with you. Just to put a bit of a wrap on this taillight wiring conversation, I thought I'd share this under fender shot of the wiring. I've got it all finished up here. I added up here the jumpers. I didn't show making those because that's redundant with some of the other wiring that we've already been through in some detail. But I made jumpers that are about 3 inches or so long that fit up in here to tie the original wiring harness coming in from the right to the pigtail coming out of the new taillight assembly on the left. and then I simply tucked it up underneath here, underneath the tabs that were welded into the frame by Yamaha. Note on these tabs, you have to be real careful when you're bending those and working with those, because they will break off all of a sudden without warning. They just snap right off. So you have to be delicate with those. Fortunately, I was able to preserve all the tabs, even though a couple of them originally were twisted up a bit and were in poor shape. So before I repainted the frame, I put a little more light on this for you. I carefully straightened them as far as I dared without breaking any of them. You can see here the ground wire is just bare right now. And based on what Big Casey told me in my inquiry for help, this ties in up here to one of these bolt throughs for the seat assembly, which I have obviously not gotten to. But the wiring is all tucked away, as you can see there. Up in this section, right up here, I think you can see the spare wiring for the turn indicators that are not used on this bike. So I just got those tucked away. And here, I think you can see the rest of the wiring. And where it comes down over here, see if we can better get some light on that for you. This is a difficult shot to make. Over here, this pigtail goes down to the swing arm and is for the brake light assembly. So I think you got a pretty good look at how I tied that up underneath there. And it's easily accessible if I should have a need to get at it. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to live test this and see if the taillight, the bulb works like it's supposed to. To test the taillight assembly, I'm going to use a jumper pack that you can see right there. That's just an inexpensive jumper pack that I bought from Harbor Freight. Believe it or not, I've never used that to jump a car yet. Knock on wood, I haven't had to. Had it around a while. I do use it a lot for this kind of thing. I rarely use live batteries for testing on motorcycles. The jumper pack is much more convenient to use. To move it around, it's self-contained. I don't have to worry about acid dribbling. I don't have to worry about being charged. I just plug it in, and it's got a charge indicator on it. It's just less fuss, less muss. I think I paid around $40 US for that some time ago. Anyway, that's what I'm going to use as a power supply because the battery has not been charged yet, as we've talked about before. The way I'm going to connect this is I'm just going to use some jumper wires. And these are just homemade leads. I keep a number of these around in different color wires. I've got green, yellow, black, and red. It really doesn't make any difference which color you use. You can buy these commercially made fairly inexpensively. I just usually make my own because I have plenty of wire around, and they're handy to have. In order to connect this up to the bike, this is going to be real simple. I'm going to take the red lead right here, the red jumper, and I'm going to go from the red clamp on the jumper pack here on the left. You can see it right here. And I'm going to bring it up to the positive terminal right here. Now remember, the battery's dead, so I'm really bypassing the battery. But going from the red clamp and just clamping on the terminal here, I'll be providing the hot side to the bike. Then on the negative side, the ground, the earth side, I'll go from the black clamp. I'm going to go directly to the black lead on the taillight that you can see right here. I'm really, in this case, going to be bypassing the frame, but I'm not too concerned about the frame not properly acting as the ground or earth. I think it'll be fine. So I'm going to connect one of the red ends to the clamp, the red clamp, and the other one I'm just simply going to connect here to the hot side, the red here going off into the electrical system of the bike. And then I'm going to do the same on the black side, connect to the black clamp, and then I'm going to go directly to the earth or ground on the taillight. Now I have not tested this full system yet. I did test the lamp fixture, taillight lamp fixture off the bike when I first got it to make sure it worked with a bulb in it, actually using this, but I have not done a complete test since it's been mounted back on the bike just a few minutes ago. Now theoretically, if I understand the wiring diagram, the ignition key here, when I turn this to the on position, the taillight, well, there's three positions to it: off, first on, second on. It's off right now. When I turn this to the first on position, the taillight will not come on because that's just the run position for the ignition system. The brake lamp, however, should work if I was to bring those two connectors on the opposite side of the swing arm for it completes the circuit. If I bring those together, and we'll go on the other side and do that in a moment, that would tell us, or should activate the tail lamp in either of the second or third positions. Once I turn this key to the third position, the second on position, the tail light should come on. Now one of the advantages again of using a power pack like this is this has an on-off switch. So right now there's no current flowing into the system, the bike system, because the switch is off. It's a bit of a safety feature. It's again one of those advantages versus using a battery, that once you connect to a battery you're hot. Here it's not hot until I turn it on, then it will push energy into the electrical system. So let's just reposition back just a little bit here so that you can kind of see what I'm going to do. You can see the tail light here, over here to the right, and you can see the ignition switch right here. So I'm going to turn the power pack on. I have now energized the system, so we'll turn the switch on to the third position because I want to activate, well, that's my hope, is the tail light will come on. And I think you just saw it came on. Turn it off, turn it on. So that tells me the current is properly flowing through the wiring to the tail light. That is the running light for the bike. Let's go on to the other side, and I'm going to ground the wires, or connect the two wires. It's not really grounding. I'm going to bring those two wires together coming through the swing arm to the rear brake lamp switch, and we'll see if the brake lamp works. You can see down here, I think you can just barely see down here, the two wires that complete the circuit to the brake lamp. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ground these two wires together right here, and that brake light should come on. Now I have the switch, and the ignition switch in the first position, and the power pack is energized. So let's see what happens when I just pull these together. And you can see that the brake lamp works. If I turn this ignition switch to the third position, the tail light comes on and the brake lamp should still work. Therefore, we know that, at least in terms of the wiring going to the tail lamp assembly and through the brake lamp wiring, the system is complete and working. Next thing I need to do is I'll be installing the actual switch that goes down into the swing arm there and ties those two wires together on the back of this switch. I think that's going to be it for this video. This is probably long enough for now. We'll pick up the next video with that brake lamp switch I just talked about down here, and the brake rod, the rear brake rod, probably the brake pedal, and we'll get into some of those next points of assembly on the Yamaha. Again, I think that's it for this video. Any questions, let me know, comments. Otherwise, thanks for watching.